In this History WoW video, we're looking at the lore, history, and appearance of the two main tree forms that the Druids can shapeshift into. Both of these forms are most usually associated with restoration specialization, and the common name for both of these forms is simply called the Treant Form. However, this is technically incorrect, since the actual shapeshifting spell is called the Tree of Life. Over the course of the game's history, there have been two different tree forms, but for the sake of simplicity and familiarity, we'll primarily refer to both forms in this video as the Treant Form, unless we need to specify. We'll explain how and why there are two different tree forms later on in the video. First, we'll start with a bit of lore, both from the real world and from the game. The name Treant is actually a play on words, being a portmanteau of the word tree and ent. Ents are walking and talking trees that appear in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings work of epic high fantasy. In fact, early in the Warcraft 3 beta, many Treants were actually just named Ents. However, since Ents were a completely new race invented by Tolkien, they fall under Tolkien's estate copyright claim, so they had to be renamed. Although it's hard to find aspects of modern fantasy that have not been influenced by the monolith that is Lord of the Rings, it should be noted that this is not the first time the Lord of the Rings has made a direct influence in the development of WoW. For example, several Blizzard devs like the ring vision seen by Frodo in Lord of the Rings movies when he puts on the One Ring, that they decided to use a similar effect when the players died and released their spirit. In WoW, Treants are usually smaller and more primitive forms of the immensely old and wise ancients, which are giant sentinel trees that protect nature. Treants are usually associated with Druids and nature. Some Treants over time can grow and become ancients, although this is rare. In the game, most Treants are classified as elementals. Just like they're arcane elementals, presumably Treants are nature elementals. The first ancients and Treants worked with Cenarius to protect Azeroth's wildlands in the Emerald Dream. However, over time, many have grown more wild and detached from the Emerald Dream counterparts. Treants in particular are seen to prone to corruption and can easily become aggressive. Both Treants and Ancients can be seen in corrupted versions in the Emerald Nightmare raid from the Legion expansion. Now let's move on to the history of the Treant Form in WoW. While there was no Treant Form in Vanilla or Classic WoW, there is one talent worth mentioning that is tangentially related to the Treants. And this talent is called Barkskin, and can be learned at level 44 from Druid trainers. The ability, when activated, reduces physical damage taken by 20% in 15 seconds and had a cooldown of 1 minute. While not Treant related specifically, it is interesting to note that this is sort of a semi-tree form in theory, as the player is covering themselves with tree bark. WoW's first expansion, the Burning Crusade, introduced the Treant Form into the game. The name of this ability and the buff it provided was called Tree of Life. The Tree of Life was featured in Warcraft 3 as an ancient, but in WoW this ability only shares its name and nothing else. The Tree of Life ability turned the player into a Treant and provided a buff to healing. Tree of Life requires restoration specialization and costs 28% of the player's mana. By the end of the Burning Crusade, its spell description read, shapeshift into the Tree of Life. While you're in this form, you increase healing received by 25% of your total spirit for all party members within 45 yards. Your movement speed is reduced by 20%, and you can only cast Swiftmend, Innervate, Nature Swiftness, Rebirth, Barkskin, Poison Removing, and Healing over time spells, but the mana cost of these spells is reduced by 20%. The act of shapeshifting frees the caster of polymorph movement and pairing effects. There were three main drawbacks to this form. First, the increase in healing depended upon the player's spirit stat. Secondly, while in the Tree of Life form, the Druid could only use a handful of abilities. Third, and finally, the movement speed debuff of 20% was not usually detrimental, but it certainly could be annoying. There was also one interesting change made to the Tree of Life form in the Burning Crusade. The change came in patch 2.4.3 when the previously mentioned Barkskin ability was reduced by the Tree of Life form. Like the other Druid forms, the Tree of Life form receives its own unique animation for swimming, dancing, eating, and walking backwards. Here are two fun Treant trivia facts. The dancing animation for the Treant is referenced to Chubby Checkler's dance, The Twist. The Treant form for both Night Elves and Tauren was the exact same model, even though the other Druid forms of both races all had various different visual distinctions. WoW would not be WoW without bugs, and here are two fun bugs that popped up when the Tree of Life form was first added. First, when the player shapeshifted into the Tree of Life form, it actually made a bear roar like the player had shapeshifted into the bear form, but the bug was fixed within a month. Another fun bug was that while shapeshifting in Tree of Life form, players could not interact with NPCs. I guess even in WoW, some trees are just full of bugs. TBC also introduced one new talent that's worth mentioning since it also uses Treants. This form is called Force of Nature and it was only available to Druids in the balance spec. This ability summons 3 little small Treants to attack enemies for 30 seconds. The talent is still in the game today and is quite useful for balanced Druids since the Treants effectively serve as temporary tanks for the Boomy. Wrath of the Lich King saw several changes to the Treant form. First, all restoration spells could now be castable on the form. However, the healing increase was reduced from 25% to 20% to compensate for this change. The rest of the changes in the Wrath Tree of Life form were all buffs. The first buff was the movement speed reduction was removed entirely. Next, 3 abilities were also made available while in this form. Remove Curse, Nature's Grass, and Thorns. Finally, the Tree of Life aura now extended to 100 yards up from 45. Another boon to Rest of Druids was that the Barkskin ability was removed from the global cooldown in Wrath. Cataclysm, WoW's third expansion, saw some huge changes to the Tree of Life form. Primarily, it was completely removed as a permanent form and was now only a temporary buff that lasted for 25 seconds. The second major change was that the model was updated from a Treant to an Ancient model. It should be noted that this was not an actual ancient model, but a scaled down one since the real ancient model would be too big for the player's environments. In Warcraft 3, the Tree of Life form was an ancient, so perhaps Blizzard wanted to be more congruency across their games instead of the players just being a trend. In Cataclysm, there were 4 different color variations of this new Tree of Life model, just like there were 4 variations for the cat and bear models updated in Wrath. Another major change was that the Barkskin ability was no longer dispellable on players. There's one armor set from Cata that is also worth mentioning since it summons Treants. The tier 12 balanced Druid set from the Firelance raid has an interesting 2-set ability. Its description reads, you have a chance to summon a burning Treant to assist you in battle for 15 seconds when you cast Wrath or Starfire. Cataclysm also saw the introduction of the one vanity glyph, which brought back the old Treant model previously used in the Tree of Life form. This minor glyph was called Glyph of Treant and was created with the inscription profession. Next, move on to the Mists of Pandaria expansion. The biggest change in MoP came when the Tree of Life form was removed as a separate ability and instead merged into a new talent called Incarnation. This new talent when the Resto spec was named Incarnation Tree of Life, and its description said, shapeshift into the Tree of Life, increasing healing done by 50%, increasing armor by 120%, and granting immunity to polymorph. Functionality, rejuvenation, wild growth, regrowth, and entangling roots is enhanced. The duration of this temporary buff also increased to 30 seconds, up from 25 in Cata. Another talent that saw several changes in MoP was the Force of Nature talent. First, the talent was made available to all Druids with the talent system overhaul, so now every Druid spec could summon Treants. Second, Force of Nature was also moved off the global cooldown. In patch 5.1, a fun little Easter egg was added, so when the Druid in Treant form from the Glyph of Treant stands near a cooking fire, it also causes them to catch on fire for the duration of the cozy fire buff. Warlords of Draenor only saw one change to the Tree of Life form in a hotfix, which stated Incarnation Tree of Life no longer enhances Life Bloom. Instead, it also enhances Rejuvenation, increases its ability by 50%, and reduces its cost by 30%. Additionally, in WoD, 2 talents were also slightly changed. First, the Barkskin ability was removed from the Feral spec, and the Force of Nature talent was updated so the summoned Treant's healing also benefited from Mastery. Legion saw a few changes to the Tree of Life talent and ability. First, the Incarnation ability itself was removed, and the Russell spec was given a specific ability with the same name and stats called Incarnation Tree of Life. With this change, the level this ability was learned at was increased from 60 to 75. The Barkskin ability also saw 2 changes. First, it was given a new visual animation. Second, it was now learned at level 26, down from 36. Next, the Force of Nature talent was again made only specific to the balance spec, as it had been before Mists of Pandaria. In Legion, with the removal of the glyphs, including the Glyph of Treant, the old Treant form became taught with the item Tome of the Wild's Treant form, which can only be bought from a vendor in the Druid Order Hall. In patch 7.2, the mana cost to change into this form was removed. An interesting aside, unlike other Druid forms, the Treant form from this tome does not protect the Druid from polymorphs. However, all spells can be cast while in this form. Although the removal of glyphs was widely unpopular in Legion, the reintroduction of this glyph and new variants is one of the exceptions where it appears a Blizzard decided to bring something back by popular demand. No changes occurred to any of the tree forms of the Battle for Azeroth expansion. The only talent that changed was Force of Nature, which now also generated some astral power for boomies when the ability was used. Like BFA, Shadowlands saw no changes to any of the tree forms. In fact, the only change was the Barkskin ability was now learned at level 24 instead of 26. Now we finally arrive at the most recent expansions of making this video, Dragonflight. Dragonflight saw several minor changes to the Druid tree forms. The most notable change was the model for the Treant was updated, which includes the one used for the Treant form learned from the Tome of the Wilds. With the talent revamp from Dragonflight and the level squish in Shadowlands, many talents had their levels and costs changed. The Incarnation Tree of Life talent was learned at level 40, down from 75 in BFA. The Barkskin ability is now learned at level 10 in Dragonflight as opposed to level 24 in Shadowlands. There's one mount in the game that is related to Treants and the Ancients. This mount is called the Wandering Ancient, and was added in patch 9.0.5 after it won the Choose the Next Shadowlands Mount community poll. One of the most unique features about this mount is that its leaves change colors with the seasons. The Ancient/Mount special animation depicts it reaching up to scratch one of its branches before shaking its body to remove loose leaves and pine cones. The animation has a small chance of including alternate objects amongst those that get shaken off, differing based on the season. During spring, there is a chance for a red apple or a normal Pepe. During summer, a toy siege tower, a leather ball, or a traveling Pepe. During fall, a jack-o'-lantern and a candy bucket, or a spooky Pepe. And finally, during winter, chunks of ice or grandfather's winter Pepe. Currently, in the game, there are 6 battle pets and companions, which are Treants. Since these tiny trees can fit in your hand, perhaps they're best called palm trees. The first of these 5 pets is named the Tedrasil Sproutling. Added in Wrath, this pet can only be obtained by Alliance players after they completed the Champion of the Darnassus achievement at the Argent Tournament in Icecrown. It costs 40 champion seals and is sold by the Darnassus quartermaster who's named Rook Hawkfist. The pet is not bind up pickup, so it can be traded to players of the Horde, and it also has a chance to appear in the Black Market Auction House. The pet's description reads, "It always wakes up dancing. What a happy little tree," which is a reference to the beloved painter instructor Bob Ross. The next Treant pet in the game is called Withers. This pet is a quest reward for Alliance players after they complete the quest, A Remembrance of Auberdine, in the Felwood Zone. However, Horde players can also get this pet since the undead NPC, Apothecary Furrows, also sells the pet for 50 silver. The Withers pet is unique in the fact that if he's exposed to water that is deep enough, the pet will actually grow to a regular sized Treant. Withers was added in Cataclysm along with the quest and zone revamps of much of the old world of Kalimdor in the Eastern Kingdoms. The third Treant pet was added in Mop and can be captured in the Eversong Woods. The Ruby Sapling's description confirms these little guys do indeed grow up to become Treants. The fourth Treant pet is named Nightmare Treant and is a reward from the achievement Family Familiar. Added in Legion, this achievement requires the player to defeat 12 Master Tamers in the Broken Isles with a full team of each of the 10 types of pets, for a total of at least 120 pet battles, assuming you win each and every single one. The Nightmare Treant is a miniature battle pet version of the Nightmare Corrupted Treants in Val'sharah. The 5th and 6th Treant pets were added in the Battle for Azeroth expansion. The Aldruzian Sproutling drops from Branch Lord Aldrius in the Arathi Highlands, and the Everburning Treant is a rare drop from Zimkaga for Horde or Onu for the Alliance in Darkshore. All of these pets received a model update in Dragonflight when the Treant model got a new update. However, since the Nightmare Treant model did not get an update, the Nightmare Treant did not receive a model update either. There are also 2 ancient pets in the game. The first pet is the Blossoming Ancient, which can only be obtained from the in-game store. But like its mount counterpart, its leaves do change with the season. The second pet is named Brute, which is a battle pet that can be bought in the Druid Order Hall. To obtain this pet is drop from Grow Vines, which grows in the Druid Order Hall at tier 2 after picking the Evergreen ability. There is also one toy item in the game that summons a Treant. This toy is called Spirit of Bashiok and drops in the mod named Bashiok and Gorgon. This toy is a reference to the former community manager, Mitcha Whipple, who used the name Bashiok on WoW in the Diablo forums. And that does it for this video. It was a bit of an amalgamation video covering many different topics, all related to Ancients and Treants, but more focus on the Druid Treant form. In total, there have been 5 different Treant forms depending on their source in WoW. If you want to count the Barkskin ability, that number is 6. As you can tell, the Druid tree forms have had a bit of a weird history in WoW, but we hope we've rooted up the problems you've had understanding their complex evolution. This video is actually the 4th in a series of videos going over the history of Druid forms. The next video will be about the Druid travel forms, including the aquatic and flight forms. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and remember to leave suggestions for future videos below, in case you want to see us branch out into other topics. See you in the next video, and as always, thank you for watching.